Okay, let's unpack this. We're diving into universal basic income, or UBI.
Yep.
It's a concept that's just everywhere right now, isn't it? Sparking these huge debates about, the future of work, poverty, social safety nets.
Absolutely. It touches on so many core issues.
And the best part is we're doing this based entirely on the stack of source material you provided us. So this isn't just a general chat about UBI.
Right.
We're looking specifically at what your articles, papers, notes, what they have to say, what it is, how it might work, the upsides, the downsides.
The real-world tests, the whole picture presented in this material.
Exactly. So our mission here is to basically walk you through this material, pull out the key arguments, the insights it contains, so you get a really clear picture of the UBI conversation as presented in these sources. I'm actually really looking forward to getting into the specific set.
Me too. What's interesting about the material you've gathered is how it lays out the core idea, but immediately pairs it with the complexities, the potential and the criticisms side by side.
Yeah, feels grounded. So let's jump right in. How do your sources define UBI? What's the sort of fundamental idea here, according to them?
Well, the material's pretty consistent on the definition. It's strikingly simple, really.
Yeah.
A fixed amount of money.
Yeah.
Given regularly.
Yeah.
To all citizens.
All citizens, universally.
Universally. And the key thing the sources stress is that it's unconditional. Doesn't matter about your income, if you have a job, if you're looking for one, none of that.
Okay. And the goal?
The core goal, as it's presented, is basically ensuring everyone has a floor, a basic income level to live with dignity and, to tackle poverty head on.
Right.
And your sources also link this idea almost immediately to the big shifts happening in the job market. Automation, AI, that whole discussion.
So they frame UBI partly as a potential answer to maybe fewer traditional jobs in the future?
That's definitely a strong theme coming through in the material, a potential response.
Okay, so it's not just helping the poor. It's this bigger idea about income security for everyone, potentially tied to economic change. Got it. If that's the concept, how would it actually work, practically? What do the sources say about the mechanism?
The material describes the mechanism as deliberately simple. Individuals just receive a set amount regularly, usually monthly.
No hoops to jump through.
Exactly. No complex applications, no means testing, no proving you're looking for work. The sources really highlight this simplicity. They suggest it could slash bureaucracy compared to, existing welfare systems.
Okay, less paperwork.
Potentially, yes. Now, the actual amount might vary depending on the place, cost of living, all that. But the principle is that minimum standard for everyone.
All right, so the how is simple. Regular, unconditional cash, but the impact, that's where things get debated, right?
Yeah.
Your sources spend quite a bit of time on what the advocates claim are the big wins.
They do.
What benefits do proponents point to, according to this material? This is where it gets really interesting.
Yeah, the material lays out several potential upsides. The most direct one cited is pretty obvious. A significant drop in poverty and inequality. If everyone gets a basic income, that baseline lifts people up.
Makes sense.
Beyond that, proponents argue it could actually boost local economies. More people with money means more spending.
I'd say stimulating consumption.
Exactly. But there's another benefit the sources seem to really emphasize. This idea of promoting individual freedom and well-being.
Freedom and well-being. How does giving people money lead to that, specifically, based on the sources?
Well, the argument presented is that a guaranteed income removes that constant grinding pressure of financial insecurity.
Okay. Takes the edge off.
Right. And that security, theoretically, could free people up. Maybe they pursue education, get new skills, switch careers.
Or start a small business, care for family.
Precisely. Things they couldn't risk before. The sources suggest it's not just about money. It's about improving mental health, cutting stress, letting people do valuable things that aren't always paid work in the traditional sense.
That's powerful. It paints a picture of empowerment, not just subsistence, if the proponents and the sources are right, like a safety net that lets you climb higher. But, okay, no idea this big is without its critics. What are the major challenges, the criticisms outlined in your material?
And this is where the sources present the other side very clearly. The biggest hurdle mentioned almost universally is the cost. Implementing UBI nationally. It would be incredibly expensive.
Right. Where does the money come from? Sustainability.
Exactly. Huge questions about funding. Then there's the other major concern, the potential disincentive to work.
The idea that people might just stop working.
Or work less, yeah. The theory is if income is guaranteed, the motivation to take certain jobs or work as many hours might decrease. That could lead to, labor shortages, lower productivity,
Hmm.
serious economic consequences.
Hmm.
And the sources also raise questions about existing social programs. Would UBI replace things like unemployment benefits, disability support, or just add on top? And what happens either way?
So massive cost, potential impact on work ethic, and interaction with the current welfare state. Those are definitely big ones, the sources flag.
Okay, has anyone actually tried this? What about real-world tests mentioned in your material?
Yes, the sources do bring up some key examples. The Finland experiment gets discussed.
I've heard about that one.
Yeah, a group of unemployed people got a basic income for 2 years. Now, the sources report it didn't really lead to a significant jump in employment for that group,
Okay.
but they also reported higher levels of well-being. People felt less stressed, more satisfied with their lives, more trust in institutions.
Ah, okay, so not just about jobs. That links back to the well-being point.
Exactly. It complicates the definition of success. The material also gives brief mentions to other pilots, Stockton, California, some initiatives in Spain, basically highlighting that people are trying to gather data.
Testing the waters.
Testing the waters, seeing how it plays out in different places. It's about understanding the effects, not just if it works, but how it works. That Finland finding is fascinating, though, pushes you to think beyond just employment numbers. Okay, let's loop back to the technology thing we touched on earlier. How do your sources kind of deepen that connection between UBI and the future of work?
The material really emphasizes that this link is becoming, increasingly central to the whole UBI conversation.
Because of automation.
Because of automation,
Yeah.
AI, yeah. The sources argue that as technology takes over more tasks, potentially displacing workers or changing jobs fundamentally.
The question becomes, how will people earn a living?
Precisely. And UBI is presented in these sources as one potential answer, a way to ensure people still have income, still have purchasing power, even if traditional employment models shift dramatically.
So less like welfare, more like an economic adaptation.
That's how it's framed, yes. Potentially a necessary adaptation for stability in a tech-heavy future. Some experts cited in the material even suggest it might become, essential.
Wow. Okay, that definitely elevates the stakes. Now, your material also specifically mentions Brazil. What's the story there, according to the sources?
The sources indicate the UBI debate is really gaining momentum in Brazil, and it's largely driven by the country's deep-seated social and economic inequality.
Makes sense, given the context.
Yeah. So proposals have been debated, and some cities or regions have actually implemented pilot programs or similar kinds of unconditional cash transfers.
What are the main goals there?
In the Brazilian context described in the sources, it's heavily focused on mitigating extreme poverty, providing a basic safety net for the most vulnerable.
But the challenges are the same.
Pretty much. Your sources make it clear that while the motivation might be strongly tied to poverty reduction, the discussions still wrestle intensely with those big questions of cost, financial viability, political feasibility,
Yeah.
the same hurdles seen elsewhere.
Interesting how the global idea adapts locally but faces similar roadblocks. Okay, looking ahead then. How do your sources frame the future prospects for UBI? Is it gaining traction, losing steam?
Based on the material, the perspective seems to be that it's evolving. It's still very much a live debate.
Not a settled issue.
Definitely not. But as more experiments happen, as more data comes in, and as these economic and tech shifts continue, the sources suggest the discussion is moving from purely theoretical to, serious policy consideration in more places.
So maybe growing acceptance in some circles.
It seems that way. The sources mention growing interest among certain economists, policymakers, people who see UBI as potentially important, maybe even critical, for future economic and social well-being.
And the final takeaway from the sources.
I think the material ultimately presents UBI as this potentially powerful, though definitely challenging tool, a possible solution for ensuring a dignified life for everyone, especially in a world facing, rising inequality and major technological disruption.
Okay. So pulling it all together from the sources you gave us, we've looked at UBI as this unconditional payment for everyone.
Right.
How it aims to simplify welfare, the arguments for it, reducing poverty, boosting freedom.
Yep. The potential upsides.
And then the big criticisms, the cost, the work incentive.
The major hurdles.
We touched on real-world tests like Finland, connected it to the future of work in tech.
And looked at how the debate plays out in places like Brazil.
It's a comprehensive overview based specifically on this material.
I think that captures the main threads presented in the sources, yes.
Yeah.
It really underscores that UBI is complex, lots of potential, but also, as your sources consistently point out, significant challenges to figure out.
It's definitely a lot to chew on. Compelling arguments on both sides clearly laid out in this material.
It absolutely is. And, given everything the sources discuss, the ongoing debates, the early experiment results, the sheer pace of technological change, it really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What fundamental shifts would actually need to happen in society for UBI to go from being this debated concept to, well, a widespread reality? Or is it just fundamentally not workable on a large scale? That feels like the big question this material leaves you thinking about.